A leaked video of interim Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz shows him warning that more store closures are on the horizon. The leak comes after the company announced the closings of 16 profitable locations in major cities due to dangerous incidents related to drug use.
And I must say, in my view, at the local, state, and federal level, these governments across the country and leaders, mayors and governors and city councils, have abdicated their responsibility in fighting crime and addressing mental illness. And we are going to have to refine and transform and modernize many of the things we do to meet the needs of our customers in a very changing operating environment in which customer behavior is changing.
While he's still pretty polite about it, in no uncertain terms, Schultz is laying blame for these closures on Democrat policies.
He certainly is, and it's really no big surprise, is it? There are consequences for bad policies. It's kind of like, duh, right? This is going to happen. It reminds me of also last year when the assistant DA in San Francisco, 50 or more of his employees left his office because he was so-called too progressive, too woke, and he was actually recalled. So I'm hoping that this is bringing a change as people see the consequences for being, as he said it very well, abdicating responsibility for fighting crime and addressing mental illness. So I'm hoping we're going to see a change here in the midterms.
And what's remarkable is that Starbucks is one of the more woke companies. If you were to have a scale of woke companies,
absolutely.
Starbucks is right over there. And it's been, it has this open bathrooms policy, I think, right?
When I worked at a Starbucks when I was younger in college, we often found heroin addicts in our bathrooms shooting up, and we would have, you couldn't really kick them out because they would be very difficult and aggressive to deal with, so you just kind of had to step away and hope they left at some point. Oftentimes you'd see, yes, and oftentimes you'd see homeless people coming in and just hanging out, and you weren't allowed to kick them out. You didn't want to also because you were afraid for your own safety. So I can completely understand why they're closing some of these stores.
Wow.
Derek, I mean, what does it tell you that a fairly liberal company, fairly liberal CEO, is admitting that these are actually policies that are harming his company and his outlook on everything, and actually saying, and almost calling out to the Democrats to say, these are policies that need to change?
Him, Bezos, and a lot of others. Billionaires running these corporations now see that these policies right now are backfiring, are harming their business as well. And so that's where you see all this stuff coming from right now.
And you see like Target and many other companies that are pushing the transgenders into women's things, all kinds of transgender infant clothing at Target, this kind of thing. And I do think it's going to backfire on them. And I think this is probably going to get me in trouble, but let me just preface it with this. I don't care if you're homosexual, that's your business. But I am really tired of going into every single store, and actually the Starbucks in my community, where there's pride flag, pride this, pride cups, pride everything. I'm just tired of having it jammed down my throat.
Me too, and I'm speaking for black people right now, okay? All right, you can't, there's not a mom in America, okay, who would be okay, in the beginning, knowing that their child their little boy is going to grow up and be gay. That's just not what black people want from their children. And I know it's not what I want. I know it's not what people that I deal with want. And so to push this, as you just said, jamming it down our throats, everywhere we go. And if you push back against it, then you are considered some kind of, oh, he's out to right, he's so far right, and it shouldn't be that way.
For the most part, you are speaking from, for the most part, from the majority position. And so it is interesting how the majority is being ridiculed and pushed off to the side by a very small portion of the population. A win for sanity. A federal judge temporarily blocked the Biden administration from enforcing directives which would force companies and schools to let biological males use female bathrooms. The ruling comes about 1 year after a group of 20 conservative states' attorneys filed a lawsuit regarding the administration's interpretation of Title IX. Charisse, your take on this latest development?
So it's a good first move, but the battle's not over yet, and that's something that we need to be very clear on, because even though this is going to maintain the current status quo, the Biden administration's Department of Education has a lot of new rules that they're proposing for Title IX right now, and the Title IX rulemaking process is still going to keep happening and still moving forward. And right now, they're trying to make gender identity a protected class, which means if you or an educator or anyone who gets federal funding for education services either misgenders someone or doesn't want to use a pronoun, then you will be processed and investigated under Title IX sexual harassment policies, which means this is a very aggressive form of compelled speech, and it's fundamentally unconstitutional.
And it also dilutes the actual instances of sexual harassment in the workplace, for instance, or in school settings where there are actual cases of assault and harassment.
Exactly.
And in this case, they're saying if you don't say someone is a they them, then you're harassing them.
Yes. Yeah, and to that point, they're trying to neutralize gender in the law. What that actually will do is take away the achievements, the accomplishments that women have made, because we have had historically been discriminated against. This was what Title IX was for. Biden's interpretation of it negates that. You will see that also with the Violence Against Women Act. I worked on that also, and they were allowing transgenders, this was about 4 or 5 years ago, transgender into domestic violence shelters, biological men into women's shelters. So it takes away the gains that women have made. We're not neutral.
Right, and let's be honest, it's not that the schools aren't going to enforce these policies. In fact, they've already started anticipating these new rules and started enforcing them. You saw the middle school students, I think it was in Wisconsin, where they were processed under Title IX sexual harassment policy because they wouldn't use the they-them pronoun of one of their peers.
A middle school.
Yes, 3 middle school boys were processed, and eventually it was dropped. But it was really, this is just the beginning to something. And we see it north at our neighbors in Canada. They've been compelling speech and mandating pronoun use for years now. In fact, you can even go to jail if you don't pay certain fines that are associated with violating that policy.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I don't work in corporate America, because I probably kept a charge. Because I'm so confused with the he, she, the pronouns, and when you're supposed to use it and who you're supposed to use it for. It's still very confusing.
And everyone's confused.
Okay.
No one actually knows.
Okay.
And they are also really working on indoctrinating our children. And I've been reading a lot more about Marxism and the history of that. And that's what the Soviet Union did to the countries that they had taken over, is they began working propaganda on the children so that the children did not rely on the family, they put down the grandparents, they put down the parents, so that the state could move in.
I love that you brought that up
job.
because Marxism is one of those inherent ills that it's like a virus. It seeks a willing host. And it finds excellent hosts in the feminist movement, in the transgender movement, in any movement that seeks to confuse individuality. That's where the Marxism thrives. There's been much rumor and justified concern over President Joe Biden's mental fitness throughout the last 2 years. This has led people to ask questions and speculation that people behind the scenes are truly running the presidency. Derek, you helped launch this new initiative which exposes the puppeteers pulling the strings from behind closed doors. Tell us more about this project that you're part of.
It's called Inside Biden's Basement. Okay, it's the first of its kind, where we've gathered the financial disclosure statements and other information and data over 1,000 Biden top appointees. And so the number of millionaires is over 430.
Wow.
And counting. Wow. And in this website, you can go in and you can look at these individuals by agency, by where they worked before, and by their name.
Wow.
And so, an example, Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy.
Who, by the way, just for context, everyone is wondering how she got this job or why she is, because every time she's on air, she does not seem to know what
know
she's talking
anything.
about.
Just a couple of months ago, she didn't even know how many barrels of oil we consume every month. You know, and that should be basic for the Secretary of Energy. But she's an example of how she exercised $1.6 million worth of stock options while she was in office, while Joe Biden was promoting that same electric vehicle company.
Pay to play.
And so the thing about it is, I was an appointee at the Department of Transportation, the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. We were responsible for contracts and grants. And so I cannot tell you how many ethics briefings I had to attend with Derek, you can't do this, Derek, you can't say that. And how many times people will actually offer me favors for contract opportunities, okay? And so I had no parts of that. But the things that these people are doing in this administration is almost criminal. And it needs to be exposed, and that's what we're doing with this Inside Biden's Basement. Now, what we're asking people to do is to check back with us on a weekly basis, because we'll be highlighting different individuals called the cellar dwellers. We're going to feature a couple of individuals each week, and we're going to highlight them in terms of what they've done, what type of money they've made inside this administration. Again, we need to hold these people accountable for what they're doing.
That sounds like an incredibly meritorious thing to do, not just for this administration, but for future administrations, because we know that regardless of party, politicians make money. They go in for the money and the power. Yes. And it's very rare that we actually get truth tellers actually exposing all of this. Yeah. Panelists, fantastic conversation as always. Thank you all for joining. When we return, we visit Joe Biden's weekly 3 lies. This administration simply can't stop. We'll be right back.